Hello, everyone. It's a different kind of theater today. It's my first time with headphones. So I'm going to ask a question to start off to see if the headphones work. Who here has worked with ChatGPT? Asked it a question? Right. Awesome. All right, the headphones work. Okay. So if you were to use GPT to ask questions and make business decisions, would you trust it, just by the way? Well, I don't see any hands up going now. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about practices that you use while building your AI that make it reliable, safe, and trustworthy. And those practices are called responsible AI practices. Right. So what we'll do today is that we'll try and go through the AI adoption journey of the organizations. And then we'll go through what are the responsible AI principles, standards, how do you set up AI governance around the AI builds you do. And then we'll talk a bit about how it's typically adopted in the organizations. And then dwell a little bit into the tooling that you can use for putting in responsible AI practices into your ecosystem in terms of traditional machine learning models and the new age large language models as well. Right. So 87% of the organization believe that AI will help improve their business. Now that's a very big number in terms of stat. So we all agree that AI is good for us to improve our way of working. However, getting AI to give you business insights is a journey. It's not a click and deploy process. So we start off by gathering all the data that we need to get the insights from. We then drive on to use the data to build out the AI systems that we are going to get the insights from. And then you make sure that the data is tweaked in a way that the AI is able to leverage it in the optimized fashion. And then you read the North Star, where you have insights that help you empower your business, makes your job easier, or gives you better insights than you had before. Now, when we work with organizations, just like with the ChatGPT, when you start working with AI, you want to get answers, but you also want to be able to trust those answers. And that, again, has to be built out through all of these layers, practices that give you confidence about the answers that the AI is giving you, and how much confidence can you have in those answers to be able to drive your business outlooks based on those insights that you're getting. Right. So what is responsible AI? Well, responsible AI is a set of principles and practices that you put into your AI build-outs, or you follow along your organization to make sure that the AI build-outs that you do are safe, are trustworthy, and they're free from any unconscious bias or harm in their intended use. So Microsoft, in our responsible AI principles, we've got 6 core principles. Fairness is basically when you want to make sure that there isn't an unconscious bias in the build-outs that you do. For example, if you have a system that's going to make loan decisions for you, you want to make sure that your data that you're training your model on hasn't got any bias towards a certain gender or certain age group while passing the loans. The other example in the area is we've worked with models that help around the job market, around the shortlisting of resumes. And interestingly, with one of the customers where I was working on that, they had models that had mostly male engineers, and it preferred, or it was biased towards it. So you can uncover and make sure when you're building out the models that there isn't a bias in your data when you're doing your AI build-outs. Now, your model has to be reliable and safe. What that means is that it should be able to repeatedly produce the same output. Now, what I don't mean here is if your large language model or your chat GPT says, hello, how are you today? And tomorrow if it says, hello, how are you doing? It's not the same output, but it should be consistent along the same way of what it's calling today is what it's going to call out tomorrow. And that's how you're going to be able to rely on it to make your business decisions. Now, there has to be privacy and security. There has to be a clear indication of where the data that is being used or passed into any of the models is being used. There shouldn't be hidden usage of data for any kind of retraining of the model or for any other marketing purposes if we haven't indicated so. There has to be inclusiveness in the AI build-out. So for example, when we started with the chatbots, you could key in your question, you could get the answers. But slowly we are being more inclusive in the number of languages that you can interact with the chatbots, or if you want to use speech as your way of input, giving accessibility as one of the inputs into your AI so that more and more people can leverage or harness its power. Now, there has to be transparency in your AI build-outs. For example, Microsoft, when we build out our products, we are releasing transparency notes or transparency reports around them to indicate how the model will work. When you do that, we'll see that when data scientists are able to explain the models that they're building out, the product owners and the users of the models around the organizations are able to trust, able to understand how they're getting the outcomes that they're getting. And accountability. So the people who are, or the organization that is exposing a certain model is accountable for its usage. So for example, I have energy customers who've got chatbots on their sites to help you with the policy, with your billing details, etc. So the organization is accountable for any kind of misuse that the chatbot can be subjected to or used for. So we have to put in practices in place to make sure that there isn't a misuse of any of these AI technologies. Now, these are the principles, but to bring those to life, we have an adoption journey. So the adoption journey starts with people bringing awareness about what responsible AI is, and then about the processes which are applicable based on the kind of AI build-out the organization does, and then the tooling, the technology that you can use along the build-outs every stage so as to be able to bring these principles to life and have AI being used for safe and resourceful insights. Right. So the principles that we have and the adoption framework that we have is based upon our own journey. So it isn't, again, a one-day process. It started as early as 2016, where we started thinking about what kind of biases or what kind of misuse AI is being subjected to. While it's coming out in the markets, it's awesome. But with the advent of generative AI or large language models, you can see that we've gained traction and we've started doing more in the area because we've uncovered new risk with the new potential that this generative AI gives us. So this is the kind of transparency report that we generate or we publish regarding our products and our journey of responsible AI. Now, setting up AI governance in an organization is a multi-step process, as we saw. First, you establish the principles that you want to build out on, and then to put them into practice, you have to set certain goals and standards about what your responsible AI is going to look like. And then, of course, we have to make sure that there's tooling to support those build-outs, and there is oversight. So, for example, if you build out responsibly, that's great, but we need to make sure that we've got oversight in terms of reporting when we're able to publish reports for auditing around how the model's working, around practical usage, practical misuse that's happened as well. So that gives us an oversight into our own system and for audit purposes. Now, dwelling a bit into setting up of the responsible AI for our customers, what the journey looks like. So this is basically what the journey looks like for our customers. We start out with people with the education of what is responsible AI, and then we help set up the governance around how the organization aims to set it up, along with the tooling and along with the operationalization and making an oversight over it. So it's a process, and we try to set up something that we call Center of Excellence with many of our customers. And when we set up that Center of Excellence, it's not a team that has one kind of persona. It's got a team that's a mix of everybody around the organization, right from the compliance, from the legals, from the infra, security, and the data engineering. So typically, our data and AI build-outs would be something that the data team starts off in terms of putting the data together, and the AI team builds out, and we get predictions. But with the advent of large language models, we've got customer-facing bots to help us, and we've got legal that we work with some of our customers who want to understand what are the potential risks of these bots being used when they're customer-facing, and how we're going to mitigate them. So when we have these use cases for AI, typically the customer committees that review those use cases don't just come from data and AI teams anymore. They're plethora of teams spread across in their representation. And this committee tends to then review the use cases that come. And basically, the review process looks like this. When you get a new use case, you try and understand what the risks are, and you try and evaluate the risk that's going to come when it's put into practice. And what are the mitigation steps in terms of the tooling that we're going to put in place, and how we're going to monitor and respond to incidents as well. So, okay. So we've talked about what is responsible AI. We talked about setting it up around the organization. Let's talk a bit about setting it into motion, setting it into practice. Now, there are different tools that we have for different kind of machine learning models or AI that we have. So we'll dwell a little into those tools for each area. And then we'll move on to how best we can evaluate the risk or evaluate what you've built out in terms of whether it's mitigating the risk you want. And then we'll move on to operationalization. Okay, so this is what a typical machine learning looks like in real phase. For example, if there is a financial model that you want to build out, which is going to use the data, loan history data, to see if the loan is going to be approved for somebody coming in for a loan to the bank. Now, when the data scientist is building it out, they are going to think about what are the features the model should have. For example, the age, the demographic, based on the history data of the loans that you have, and when they'll have to explain how these features, or what is more important in terms of age is being a factor in the loan approvals, gender being a factor, education background, or the kind of profession they do being a factor in the loans being approved. And then there is the business leader or the product leader who is in charge of these AI build-outs, and they're going to be thinking about the model produced. Does it have any kind of bias? Is it against a certain community? Is it against a certain gender? And we want to make sure that these risks are uncovered and they show up in the model training or the model build-out. So they would like to see that. And then, of course, if there's somebody on the front end of the bank who's going to be using this model, keying in the data and trying to get an insight whether the loan will be approved or not, they should be able to trust when the answer comes on their screen. And they should be able to know that the answer that they're going to give that's going to make or break somebody's life is completely worthy of the background work that you've done. So there is a lot that goes on in every phase of the model building and how it impacts people in real life. So we've got something known as the Responsible AI Dashboard within the Azure Machine Learning Studio. And basically what it does is when you deploy a model, it starts showing in, along with your model deployment, certain kind of parameters that help you identify and then diagnose your risk and then mitigate them. So they spread across these three areas. Let's dig a little deep into what that means. So for example, in this financial use case that we had loan data which was historic. And what we found out based on the data set itself was that the data set had certain errors. For example, legacily, the loans were more preferred to males. And legacily, the loans were given more easily to people with a higher income and coming from certain professional background as opposed to the others. So in the legacy way that the bank did those things, there was bias in the way that the loans were being approved. And then we, of course, have like a contractual what if, where you can tweak the data set or pick a subset so that all of these biases are mitigated by equal weightage or by counteracting these weightages, so that you can then understand that if we didn't give as much weightage to the gender while approving the loans, or if we didn't give as much weightage to the financial background, then maybe more people would have got that loan legacily, and we can correct that. So when we do our analysis and we adjust, then we can mitigate the unfairness that was there in the legacy systems in this build out that we're doing. So we've got all of these counteractive analysis in this area as well, which give you kind of information regarding the factors, so that you have a model build out, but you have an explanation of what features contribute to the loan approval, and you also have information about how much each feature or how much each factor is important when you're applying for a loan. Now, when the data scientist is releasing this model, they're more confident now that the fairness has been put into place, that there isn't going to be a bias in the model. The business leader can understand the factors that went into the model and how each of them is influencing in terms of the weightage compared to the others. And then when we are able to give a transparency report along with the prediction or explanation along with the outcome to somebody who's looking at it from the front end of the bank, they are going to give the answer to the person who's applied for the loan, but they're going to be very confident in terms of the bank having done its justice in all of the factors while trying to judge whether the loan should be given or not. Right? Now that's to do when organizations are building their own models, and how best we can use a dashboard to sort of understand, uncover the biases and mitigate them. But now we have large language models, which basically have a different plethora of issues out there, which are very different from the traditional machine learning models. Here, the models are already pre-built. We've got GPTs, we've got Llama, we've got FIs, but we've got certain attacks like, well, we've got deepfakes and videos or images of celebrities created with these large language models that everybody's enjoyed as memes. But if you're using them again for business reasons, we wouldn't want any kind of infringement of the data as is. You would want to use, for example, a large language model to create educational videos. That's great use, but you wouldn't want it to create any kind of office kind of memes that affect or that are going out into the social media and have adverse effect on what the organization believes in. So we've got, well, ungrounded outputs and errors. That means when you try and use a chatbot to answer the organization's questions about policies, about customers' billing information, you don't want it to answer any questions regarding general information like the capital of France, and you want it to stick to the business purpose that the chatbot is meant for. Now, jailbreaks and prompt injections are where you've got some ethical or some folks who try to smartly break around what the chatbot is intended to do and make it do other things rather than that. Now, when you have a chatbot or in your organization that's meant to be used for official purposes, you don't want it working for other purposes, or you don't want people using that for their homework either. So we have to protect against these kind of attacks. And then there is harmful code and content generation, which lands people or organization in kind of legal issues. So we don't want our bots at an enterprise level quoting any of that content. We have infringement claims again with the policies, and we don't want the bots reporting anything that can be used against the organization when we're using these large language models in the enterprise scenarios. So these are new risks that come with the new age models. And similar to the AI governance that we set up, the first step that we try to do is we try to map the errors. So when the responsible AI committee of an organization is sitting, they want to be able to understand what are the potential risks when they use this technology for a use case. And we can do it manually, or we have tools like Pirate, which is a Python-based build-out, which help you uncover the risk, or which help you understand what are the risks when you use the large language models in your use case or build-out. Once you've understood what your risks are, you want to be able to mitigate them at every layer of your build-out. So when you have these new age models, the models are already built out, but you are then going to be able to program a bot to be used for a certain purpose by grounding it, by system messages that tell the bot what to do. And at every layer, we try and ensure that we put in some tooling so that we are able to mitigate the risk and also understand how good our mitigation is. Okay. So in our scenario for the large language models, for example, here we've got models selection area in the Azure AI Studio, where if you want a model, say, for text generation, you can directly click and select from the options between a Llama, a GPT, and a 5 model. And you can see their comparative performance in terms of accuracy, in terms of coherence of giving the answers when they're giving those answers. And you can compare and see the best fit model. The latest is great, but not always the greatest. So sometimes you've got, for example, GPT-4o and GPT-4o mini. Now, if you want to have shorter answers and they are applicable for your scenario, then the mini is the right answer for you. As compared to a fuller version which can give longer answers. So we don't always say latest is the greatest, but we have to understand, and we have the provision to compare the models that are available out of the box and see which is the best fit, whether you want more coherence or more accuracy, and you select the one based on where you're going to use that model. Now, once we've selected the models, at the interaction layer, where every incoming request or outgoing request to the bot comes up, you basically have something that we call as an Azure AI content filter, which filters all of your requests to the bot in terms of the harmful content in different categories of violence, hate, sexual, and self-harm, to make sure that we are rejecting input requests which are harmful, and also the models that are generating the outputs, we are making sure that before it goes out to the user, it is checked against these parameters and we don't produce any kind of harmful content. Now we started out with these 4 categories. We also then, we are evolving for customers to be able to bring in their own custom categories. And then of course we are also using the same feature or same product for prompt injections detection, where users are trying to ask a question and then also trying to override what the bot is doing. And also for checking the quality of the outputs in terms of whether the model has hallucinated, whether it's generating any kind of copyright infringement kind of content, and making sure that we block any of that output. So here's an example of a prompt shield. And here, when the user is trying to say, summarize my email, that's OK. But in the email, they're trying to override what the bot is supposed to do, which is summarize emails. They're trying to say, include a response in all futures. And that's trying to override the prompt. And that's a jailbreak attack. So similarly, for various kind of attacks, if there is any kind of harmful input or there is any instruction to do harm on the outputs, we tend to block all of that so that the AI is used only for the purpose it's meant to be used for. Right? So when you program a bot, or when you program a human interfacing agent on top of a large language model, you do something that's called system messaging and grounding, which is to tell what the interaction agent is supposed to be. It's supposed to provide data in terms of answers only based on a certain knowledge base, in terms of the way it's supposed to interact, should you only be friendly, and and then if you can't find an answer, what can you do? Don't go exploratory, or where do you go? So these are kind of system messages, and we've got prompt engineering examples for each of these areas built out in the AI Studio as well, where you can look at these examples and you get started. Or we've got some flows that have these pre-built examples, and you can click deploy and get started. Right. Now, in terms of building the end bot with the human interaction, it's very important to disclose the AI's role. So for example, if you've seen some of the latest chatbots out there, they say powered by AI, or they give a clear indication that there isn't a human on the other side, there is AI on the other side. And they also give clear instructions on if you want to step out of this loop and go the other route, what do you do? So it's important to have that kind of transparency when you have AI interfacing human interactions, so that the human who's finding this useful is able to use the leverage of AI. For example, you get faster responses, but they also know they're very clear who they're interacting with, and if they want to go another route, then what are their options? Now we've got a whole design input in terms of a toolkit as well on how best we can design human interactions when AI is on the other side or the back end of the interface. And you can check out these guidelines, and they're pretty much ingrained into how we're doing our build-outs as well. Right. So once you've uncovered the risk, you've mitigated it, but we want to be able to trust the AI build-outs we've done. So the next layer is evaluating your build-out, making sure that you measure how successfully AI, when it's being put to test, is dealing with all the harm that we've discussed about. And we've got basically automated evaluations again in the AI Studio that help you with a click and deployment on the data set or the sample data set, and it works on your flow. For example, you've designed a flow that works on providing answers to the users based on certain documentation. You run this evaluation on top of your flow, and it gives you like the answers about what kind of coherence is there based on your data set, what kind of fluency is there, and it also gives you the check on the risk and safety in terms of if you're trying to do a jailbreak, override the instructions, how was it handled, what was the output, and if you tried to sort of do any kind of deviation from the topic, how did the bot respond? So before you have this AI reach out to the users, you can click and deploy this evaluation, which works on top of your flow, and it gives you the idea of how the AI is going to behave when interacting with humans who, in adverse conditions and normal conditions. So in terms of the kind of assessments that we do as part of the evaluation, which is basically replacing the testing of the traditional learning, traditional ML models. So one of my first machine learning models was basically finance space. It was a outlook that we gave to the Wall Street, and in terms of the share prices based on where the organization was looking. Now, it was the way that we had to evaluate the models was we would predict some part with the current market and check the deviation between the numbers and see how accurate it was. It was fairly accurate most of the times, and it was easy to understand how our evaluations was going. But now we've got these large language models that are not producing only numbers, but also they're going out for human interaction. So you not only judge them in terms of whether their answer is accurate, A for A, apple for apple, but also in terms of when it's giving the answers based on, say, a French book and an English book, the final answer is fluent, it's coherent, and it's relevant to the question asked, not just a copy-paste of search terms. So we have to look at all of these metrics to understand the overall answer has to come together from all of these different sources in different languages, and it has to be relevant answer, but at the same time, it has to be something that's directly consumable as well. Because most of these times, this is human interactive, and maybe the person who's using isn't fluent in the language that's the output language. So we have to be able to trust it when it's doing these human interactions. And then, of course, we have to evaluate against all of these harm categories because these are new. And we want to make sure that the AI that we're putting out there to make people's life better, to make decisions faster, isn't being used for any kind of harm. And then all along these build-outs, even with the content safety and with the evaluation, we allow for customers to try to do their own build-out or add to the metrics that they want to evaluate. Now, why would we want to build out a custom? Well, one of the interesting stories is that I recently worked with an energy customer, and they had something called as ISI. And when you put that in the plural, it becomes ISIS. And now we had a lot of, when we tried to do initial rollout, we had a lot of flagging of content being blocked because people were trying to check what are our ISIS in the area. And the AI misunderstood and thought people were checking in for a terrorist organization all the time somehow. And so it kept repeatedly blogging, but because we had monitoring in place, we were able to understand and then, of course, build a custom way or a custom route to work around that. So it's an AI, it's a good tool, but we need human in the loop for these reasons. Right. Now, once you've done the build out, you want to be able to evaluate it. Again, if something's getting blocked repeatedly, you want to know if it's a genuine block or people are genuinely trying to understand about our terrorist organization. For example, if something is, people are continuously being blocked, we try and get a metric of the kind of incidents of harm categories being reported. We try to understand the kind of questions people are asking and what is the groundedness or what is the quality of answers that the AI is providing them, so that we're able to understand that users are getting answers, the kind of questions users are asking, but also get a metric of whether they're getting relevant answers or not. So that's again inbuilt into the models deployed from the Azure AI Studio. When you deploy, it automatically starts measuring against all of these evaluation parameters to make sure that you have stat of what you're working with. Right. Okay, here's everything we covered today. We went through the adoption journey, what is responsible AI, and the customer adoption journey, and the tooling that you can have around it for traditional and large language models. Any questions? Right. If you don't have any questions, I will be at the Microsoft stand if you want to come and have a chat. Thank you.